Last week we learned that metal pipes can dissolve some of their metal ions into water. So this week we're going to be looking at why that happens. Why does metal dissolve into water sometimes? So in order to do this, we'll need lab materials. So these are materials that should be commonly available at your home. First thing, 20 dull or dirty pennies. The next thing you'll need is a 1/4 cup of white vinegar. If you don't have distilled white vinegar, you can use any other kind of vinegar, such as apple cider vinegar or rice vinegar. If you don't have those things, you can also use lime juice or lemon juice or orange juice. The next thing you'll need is 1 teaspoon of salt, a clear or shallow bowl, something that looks like this. Make sure that it's not metal. 2 clean steel nails. And if you're not sure if your nails are made of steel, you can take a refrigerator magnet and you can tap them to see. And if they are magnetic, then that means that they are made out of steel. 1 clean steel screw or bolt. Also, make sure you can check it by making sure it sticks to a magnet. And some paper towels. For our first step, we're going to take our vinegar, unscrew the cap, and pour about 1/4 cup of vinegar. And we will transfer it to our bowl. The next step is that we'll take our salt and we will collect 1 teaspoon and we will stir until it is completely dissolved. So we're giving that a stir. And we're looking for all of the salt to dissolve, or as much of it as possible. And then once you have your salt mostly dissolved, take 1 penny and place it in the jar for about 10 seconds. Here's what our penny looks like right now. Actually, let me grab a dollar penny. Let's use this penny. It's from 1964. Now, I'm just going to dip it into this liquid for about 10 seconds. But first, before we put the pennies in, what do you think will happen? And let's watch what happens. Okay, so what do you notice immediately? Now you'll start to notice that Abraham Lincoln's coat looks like a little more shiny. It has a little bit of that copper sheen to it that the rest of the penny doesn't have. So now let's take all of the pennies and put them in the vinegar and let them sit for 5 minutes and see what happens. So you can watch these change for the first few seconds, but after that, you don't really see anything happen. So now we're going to take 10 of the pennies out and we're just going to set them on a paper towel to dry. And what we will do with the other 10 pennies is we will rinse them. But we want to keep our vinegar in place. So now I have 10 pennies that are not rinsed. And I'm gonna go rinse these 10 pennies really well under the sink. I've labeled the second paper towel with the rinse pennies rinsed. Be sure to label so you know which is which. Now I'm going to let these sit for about an hour. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to take one screw and put it in the liquid that I have. And I'm going to take one nail and completely submerge it as well. And this other nail, I'm going to lean with just a little, half of it sticking out of the water. So one nail is submerged in the liquid, a screw is submerged in the liquid, and the nail is partially sticking out, as you can see from the side view. So, after 10 minutes, what do you notice with the nail and the screw and the nail that's sticking out of the water? So I'm going to zoom in really close. So what do we notice? Now you'll notice that the screw has lots of bubbles floating off of it. So does the nail that's completely submerged. And the nail that is halfway submerged has lots of bubbles too. What else do you notice? If you look at the nail that's standing out of the water, you may also notice that there is a definite color change from the bottom part of the nail to the top of the nail. We can see that the top of the nail is still a little shiny and silvery, and the bottom is very black and dark, and it has those bubbles. So we're going to let this sit for an hour total, and then we will remove it. But one other thing I also want to point out is that if you can look over on this side, you'll notice there's a little piece of copper here that floated off of one of the pennies, and it floated over to the nail, and now it's actually touching the nail, and it looks like there's a little piece of hair or something too. We'll talk about that more shortly. But for now, just check out that little piece of copper that's just sticking to the nail. Now that it's been an hour, let's take a look and see what our pennies look like. So, as you'll recall, what our pennies look like before, it might have been something like this. And if we compare that to what the pennies look like now, they're much more shiny, although some of them do have some more black coating remaining on them, but certainly much more shiny than this. Now let's take a look at what happened to the unrinsed pennies. Now, you may notice this blue-green substance on these pennies, particularly this one here, which is an old penny from 1957. Now, notice this color on the paper towel underneath. It's this blue-green color. You'll notice that underneath a lot of these pennies. And most of them have this little bits of this blue-greenish color that's built up on them. Huh. That's kind of interesting. And if you compare them overall, they tend to be blacker, darker, and have different colors than the rinse pennies. Now let's take a look at our screw and our nail. So I'll just take this out of the water so we can get a good look at it. And maybe I can hold this up to the light. Let's see if that helps. You'll notice that half of this nail is light colored still, the half that was sticking out of the water, and then the half that was in the water is now this dark color. Huh.